Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is the podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. On today's episode, I spoke to Hassan from the Centre of Healing. I've known Ryan for about 5 years now. We've been staying in touch but haven't been able to sit down and do this. So it was great to finally find the time to do it. He shares his story. He's got an amazing story about overcoming addiction, not only saving his own life, but using that to help other people. And now through the Centre for Healing, helping people from all over the world through the work that they're doing. So he has some really relatable and just simple points that all of you guys can take away. So I really recommend listening to it. Keep a notepad because there's some really great things that he touches on. And once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. I don't think we've talked for, 4 or 5 years, or it's been a while, but it is, I always say this, but the best part about doing the podcast is you reconnect and connect with so many different people. And I'm really looking forward to, being able to catch up with you over this interview, mate.
Me too, mate. Thanks for having me on, Nick. Yeah, it has been a few years. Time's gotten weird the last couple of years, hasn't it? With all that's happening with the pandemic and lockdowns and all that. I was talking to Melissa, my partner, yesterday, and it's like, yeah, time's strange. Like, we'll think about something that happened a few months ago and it feels like a few years ago, but then also something that happened a few years ago and we're like, oh, that feels like a few months ago. It's all a bit mixed up at the minute.
Completely. Oh, it's confusing. Like, I was thinking back to something from, I think, 2 years ago the other day, and I thought my brain was, processing it as if it was like a few months ago. And it like you said, everything's like been meshed into one thing, and yeah, it's hard to keep track.
It certainly is, mate. But congratulations on the book, by the way.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been good to get that out there, and virtually launching it from over here. So another sort of bit of content to get out into the world.
It's awesome.
So before we go into it, can we normally get the guest to just give an overview on your background and what you do, how you came to where you are? Do you mind just giving a bit of an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I run a business called the Centre for Healing. I run that with my partner, Melissa. We've been doing that for the past, I think, 6 years now. So, we were an outpatient centre located in Melbourne, where we were dealing with all sorts of people who were coming in with drug addiction, depression, anxiety, bipolar, stress, all sorts of myriad of things. And we were treating clients holistically and naturally. The backbone of what we did then and still do now is treat people's trauma. And we have a really big passion around, educating people around trauma and helping people be able to heal from their trauma, which, I'm sure we'll get into this in the show, which really manifests as so many issues when it comes to mental health, addiction, and that kind of thing that we run into in our life. So that's sort of, and there's a lot to go into there, but my backstory, I used to be a tradesman, funnily enough. So big career change. So the reason for a change of career, not was because I just decided, hey, I want to not be a tradie and I want to work in mental health. I kind of had my own breakdown, and breakthrough, to try to give you the backstory. I probably started to notice feelings of anxiety around the age of 10. I remember being in kind of grade 3 or 4 at school. I never would have had this language back then and been like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety. None of that kind of stuff. But I just knew I had this inner feeling of kind of dread. It started in social situations, started to bleed into all areas of school, then sport, which I loved, sabotaged my sporting career because I would get so anxious, before a footy game or cricket game. And this feeling was very much internalized. Back then, most households didn't have this emotional awareness where we would sit down at dinner at night and just talk about, hey, how are we feeling internally? What's happening emotionally? It was all about, how we're going at school, grades. Are we captain of the footy team? Are we playing this week? Do we win? All of this achievement kind of stuff. So I really internalized a lot of these feelings of dread and anxiety. And funnily enough, that doesn't really help the situation. It makes it worse. So this kind of, I used to feel like it was a gremlin inside of me, was getting bigger as the months and years progressed. And, I got to high school age and I found alcohol like most people do. And I thought to myself, hey, this liquid here, it makes that gremlin inside me quieten down a bit for an amount of time. Even though, the next day that gremlin would be back and only be a little bit of interest attached, it worked for that short amount of time. So I started drinking binge drinking on the weekends very, very heavily. And that's also a culture in Australia and other areas of the world. So it was very easy to fall into. So yeah, drinking a lot and escaping, stopping football, cricket, all of that sporting stuff, not paying too much attention at school, just trying to mitigate this feeling that I had inside of unease and dread. It got to the point where there was this kind of feeling like you felt like around every corner, someone or something was going to jump out at you. And even though that never actually happened, that feeling is very, very real, that fear that keeps feeding off itself. I got to the age of 20 when I started taking illicit drugs. It was on my 20th birthday. I started taking ecstasy and speed. And I thought, wow, if this liquid over here helped dull that fear down, these drugs over here are making it disappear completely. Right. And all of a sudden I would go out and take these drugs and I would feel incredibly open. I would feel incredibly connected, to other people. I often remember now looking back, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Like I never had any emotional awareness or anything back then, but I love kind of looking back and putting pieces together. But I remember sometimes I would take these drugs and I would literally say to myself out aloud or internally, oh, this is me. Like I finally feel like myself. And once again, it's interesting looking back. I remember when I first started taking ecstasy and I would have these feelings, and I never thought too deeply about it at the time, but I would obviously go out with groups of friends and who would be doing the same thing. And I would look at them and they would go out and they would, take these drugs, drink whatever it was, and they would have a bit of fun and then not really think about it or do it for maybe a few months. And maybe someone else's, there was a birthday or a celebration and they might do it again. Whereas for me, the moment that I started taking those drugs, I said to myself, I'm going to do this as much as possible for the foreseeable future. And it was weird because we were taking the exact same drug, but it was having this different effect. And once again, I didn't have the knowledge or the understanding to jump too much into that at the time. But looking back with all the knowledge I have now, it was really pulling me out of a much deeper pit, whereas other people had a much more healthier baseline level of their emotions. I was just in this pit with this fear happening all the time, and it was able to lift me out. So no wonder I go back to it. And this is why, I'm so passionate about educating people around addiction. And addiction isn't about the drug at all, because, research tells us that of anyone who takes illicit drugs, around 10 to 20% will develop some sort of dependence or addiction, which means that 80 to 90% won't, which is the vast majority. And even drugs, you might say, well, heroin and methamphetamine, that must be different. It's not. It's still those same numbers. So the question is, what makes that 10 to 20% susceptible to a dependence or an addiction? It's because they're in too much emotional pain and emotional distress, and it's helping them, it's the only solution that we have to our problem. So I went through this period in my 20s where I would call myself a functional drug addict, in that I was able to hold down a job. I was wonderful at wearing a mask. I was wonderful at making other people go, wow, he's doing great. Look how happy he is. I met a girl, I fell in love, we got the house, the mortgage, the dog. I was, like I said, a tradesman earning really, really good money. But on the weekends, I was blowing every cent of that money on drugs and alcohol. I was, a zombie at work for the first couple of days of the week. People would come to me for advice on their life, and I would be great at giving other people advice, but I certainly couldn't give myself advice or listen to that advice and embody it. I would always think to myself, people would come with their problems, and then I would think, they'd ask me, like, how are you? And I'm fine. I'm fine. Classic. And I'd think to myself, I'll deal with my stuff later on. As soon as I had those quiet moments alone, all of this negative emotion, this energy would start to come up in my body. And I would think, don't like this, quick, let me escape. And so that's when drugs, alcohol, even gym was an addiction for me at the time. I still go to the gym now. I love moving my body. It's great for my mental and physical health. But at a time, it was a real addiction, which means that anything can be an addiction. It's our relationship to that thing. I had a marriage breakdown after this period, and that was where I went from, I say, functional drug addiction to really dysfunctional really fast. So, I started using methamphetamine and GHB every single day in higher and higher amounts. I ran through whatever money I had really quickly. So I started dealing drugs to support my habit, which is what 99% of people dealing drugs do. And that led to a lifestyle of just, my days consisted of, it was a simple life. It wasn't easy, but it was simple: buying, selling, and using drugs. that was it. That was my day. I was living in a house where, no one really slept. People were coming and going all the time. I would be awake for 4 or 5 days at a time, then sleep for about 25 to 30 hours, wake up, do it all again. One time I was awake for 7 days. I was literally awake for a week. I've got a little toddler now. I remember when he was a newborn, I'd have one night of crappy sleep and I'm like barely able to cope the next day. And I'm like, man, I survived on 7 days of no sleep. It's incredible what the human body can do.
It's insane. Yeah.
So I went through this. I got in trouble with the law. I was arrested a couple of times, in remand in prison. Like one moment I remember sort of sitting in this concrete cell by myself, no windows, just white concrete and a little toilet. And I was just looking at this wall. I was starting to withdraw from the drugs I'd been using every day. And I'm thinking, how the hell did I end up here? How the hell did this kid who had a loving parents, middle-class upbringing in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, seemingly had, most opportunities you could have. How did I end up here? And it was a tough life. It really, really was. And I was just very, very fortunate that when I kind of lost everything material, the one of the times I got arrested, I literally, all the money, drugs, everything, I'd written off my car because I overdosed at the wheel. Thank God no one else was hurt. So I'd lost everything material. So I was kind of at a place of desperation where I wanted to get help. And I didn't quite know what to do because I'd never reached out for help before. I hated asking for help. That was a big block of mine. So I was like, what do drug addicts do when they want help? Well, they go to rehab, right? So I started Googling rehab, and I'm like, okay, there seems to be private and public. Private rehab's like 30 or 40 grand. I certainly don't have that kind of money and I'm not going to put that on my parents. And public rehab was a 6-month waiting list at the time in Victoria. And at that point, I was like, I'm going to be dead in 6 months. There's no way. So I ended up doing this home-based detox through a government company where you kind of get some support from a nurse, a care and recovery worker, a doctor. They set you up with appointments and stuff, but you do it from home, which I was able to get clean for 12 days. Any person struggling with addiction knows the battle isn't stopping using, it's staying stopped. I'd gone through detox and withdrawal 100 times, so it's about, but that's not, and a lot of society don't understand that. They're like, if they just stop drinking or stop the drug, they'll be fine. But if we don't address the underlying reasons why, we'll invariably go back to it. Or we'll switch up our vice. So I relapsed after 12 days and that was sort of the most important moment of my life. I ended up quite synchronously meeting with a woman who's now my partner. That's a whole nother story. I ended up in her office one day. She was a therapist. I spent 3 hours in her office and we spoke about drugs for less than 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. And the rest were unpacking all of this emotional baggage and this emotional trauma that I didn't know that I had, that was in my system from when I was a very young kid. And I had this just incredible experience where I realized I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not my behaviors. I'm not my patterns. I'm not my beliefs. I'm not the thoughts that I have, these opinions about myself. I uncovered that I not only didn't love myself or like myself, I fucking hated who I was as a human being. And I'd hated myself, not just from my addiction, but from when I was a kid, I had a belief, like a lot of men do, I'm sure you hear, Nick, that I can't be vulnerable. And this is why when I talk about wearing a mask, so that was from a deeply held belief that I can't be vulnerable. I can't see anybody else. I can't let them see me struggle. So that was why I would put on that brave face and that smile all the time, which is incredibly unhealthy. I hadn't cried at this point for about 15 years, which is really unhealthy. So when I started to unpack this stuff, I started, imagine 15 years of tears starting to come out. It was incredible, and, I cry all the bloody time now. But, so I had this incredible experience where who I thought I was really fell away. I'm not my addiction. I'm not my thoughts, all of that. And I just knew from that point, I've got more work to do at this point, but I know that I don't need drugs to survive. Yeah. Because that's what it feels like. It's like, I cannot live without taking massive amounts of methamphetamine and GHB every day. This is how an addict feels. But I knew that that wasn't what I needed anymore. So that started this process of detoxing once again, this time for good, and then going and really unpacking and working on myself. I got really curious at this point. I'm like, man, what else have I got going on in here that I've neglected? Because me, like a lot of people, I spent my time up in my mind. Yeah. Just constantly cognizing my experience of life, trying to interpret, understand everything, and neglecting what was happening in my heart and my body, which is where all of our, emotions are really held. And so I started unpacking. I was having these incredible experiences. And then I had the vision or the epiphany that I was meant to open up a center and help people who were going through what I went through or something similar. And that sort of, sparked something inside of me. I started studying, a lot of different modalities. I went down the traditional route and then kind of veered away from that because, that's got its place, the traditional route and talk therapy. But I felt really drawn to helping people on a much deeper level, which is kind of my experience and what I went through. So that led to a lot of study, a lot of reading, and then eventually opening up at the Centre for Healing, like I said, about 6 or so years ago. And I did that with Melissa. She wasn't my partner at the time, but we started that business. We had sort of no money, no backing. We were just passionate. We were fired up. And we're like, look, if we start this, like we didn't have money for the first month's rent of the office. So like, let's just start. If it doesn't work for people, then we'll just go out of business, like real quick. If people do, get results and do really well, then we'll be able to stay in business, grow and help more people. And so we're lucky enough that it worked out to be the latter, and people were really, really digging it. And, that led us to running that outpatient clinic. We moved online at the end of 2019. Right now, we're more in the education space, so really educating people about mental health, addiction, and trauma. Also practitioner training. So we're helping a lot of other therapists and people that want to get into this field start to learn some modalities to help people with trauma. And, I checked the other day, we've had, I think about 4,000 just over students go through one or more of our courses in the last 18 months. And it's been quite the journey. I've had a baby along the way and all of that kind of stuff. So that's the condensed version.
Well, mate, thank you for giving me the condensed version, because there's a lot in the condensed version, and it's pretty powerful. And I think there's too many things within what you just said there to, discuss in this podcast, but so many, really powerful things in your story. And, one of the main things, I just think it's amazing, you as a guy being able to talk so openly and, vulnerably about that. And that's what we need more in the world, because as you were saying, the reason a lot of this stuff happens is we're not taught at a young age how to identify that, how to understand it. We don't have that education. And, my story was very similar, and I had, addiction to sport, and then it led to, alcohol and using that to escape things and getting in trouble, and but not knowing, why or how to sort of deal with it. And it's such a common thing. And the more that you talk about it, the more you realize how many people, go through similar experiences. So I think, it's amazing that you can talk about it and, what you've built it into. It's such a good story and such a powerful story for anyone listening to it. But if we look at, addiction, as you were saying, I think that, and I mean, I don't specifically work in that area, but from what I've seen, there's just simply not enough mainstream education on addiction. I guess people often look at addiction as drugs or alcohol or these, certain categories, but addiction could be absolutely anything. And is that one of the, I guess with you, the work you're doing, that's one of the things you've seen, I guess, that maybe, there are outlets out there to deal with the surface level of, okay, how do we, put a Band-Aid on this and sort of, get this person through it. But we're not going into breaking down what's actually happened for this person to behave in this way, and also not looking at it in a broad enough sense of someone could be addicted to work to mask the exact same pain that an ice addict is using. And we're not talked about it. And then we're very quick to sort of shame people and judge people. And, I think it's just, there literally can't be enough education and awareness about that area, because it's just, so far to go. But yeah, is that some of the stuff that, you're educating people on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just what you said about vulnerability as well. It's just an important point. I think when we can become vulnerable, it gives other people permission to be vulnerable as well. And, you know, for God, like you and me, we've been talking about this stuff for years. So it's kind of second nature. And when someone says, oh, you're being vulnerable, I'm like, am I? Like, I don't know, I'm just talking. But, you know, when we start to do that, it really starts to bring down other people's walls. And you'll find that, yeah, if people listening and listen to my story, they can go, well, I haven't had issues with, you know, methamphetamine and GHB, but I can identify with that in a different area. Because as humans, we go through these themes, you know, we're having a unique experience, but we go through these themes together. And one of them is addiction. You know, it's a spectrum. It's not an on or off switch. We love, as a society, you spoke about Band-Aids and this symptom management and labeling people. And look, it has its place, but it's become the real dominant way to look at these issues. And so we want to say, well, this person has depression or they don't. This person has an addiction or they don't, like it's an on-off switch, but we're all on that spectrum. You know, I talk about it. We all have that compulsion to escape. Okay. That's what addiction is. It's this pull, it's this compulsion to escape from whatever experience we're having right now. Yeah. And it's this escape from ourselves. Because like, if I have a friend, like, you know, let's say we're hanging out, Nick, and I'm an asshole, and you're like, fucking hell, Ryan, he's annoying me so much. It's like, you can leave. You can tell me to get out of your house, or you can leave my house. Like, you can leave. If I hate myself, I can't get away from myself. So the only way that I can do that is I need to change my consciousness in some way. And we can use drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, sex, food, work, codependent relationships. It's the same compulsion. It's really important what you said about work, because I would see them all the time. I still do. It's like I can have a heroin addict coming in off the street and a highly successful CEO coming in because he's stressed to the eyeballs doing cocaine all the time, right? One is socially celebrated, one is socially stigmatized, but it's the exact same compulsion acting out in both of them. They just have a different coping mechanism that is, you know, active for them. You know, someone found heroin work, someone found working 80-hour weeks, not being present for the family, running into health issues because of stress all the time. But that person gets looked at by society and goes, oh, what a go-getter. Oh, did you get that promotion? How much money are you making? So it's like this positive reinforcement of this really, you know, addictive nature. And it might be important to, you know, give a definition for people listening. So the best definition I've come across in terms of addiction is any behavior. So right there, we're like not just talking about drugs and alcohol, any behavior that we find craving in doing, relief in once we do it, but despite it having negative consequences in other areas of our life, we are unable to stop. So that can be anything. So think about, gambling, right? So gambling is a big one, gambling addiction. So let's say that I like to gamble, okay? And I say, well, I'm going to set aside, $50, and each Saturday I'm going to have a bet on the horses, and I do that and I enjoy it, right? And maybe I do think about it during the week and look forward to it. So there's a craving to do it, but it's not having negative consequences in other areas of my life. I'm not addicted. Let's say that starts to get a little bit out of control, that behavior, and that money creeps up and up, and I'm using my credit card. And then all of a sudden, I can't send my son to his school camp this year because I've spent that money on gambling. Now I can really start to define that as an addiction because it's having negative consequences in other areas of my life. But if I'm still undertaking it, then I have to look at, at possibly having a problem there. But yeah, it's anything,
Totally.
like that compulsion. This is why people switch addiction so much. If we don't deal with that underlying pain and that driver, then yeah, people might, go and get clean from drugs. They'll go to a detox or a rehab facility, come back to life, and they stay away from that drug. But now they're drinking heaps. Now they become over controlling and overbearing in a relationship. They're smoking cigarettes all the time.
Totally.
They start video gaming compulsively, and that's all they're doing. And so we switch it. Yeah. And that's not to say, if we switch from, let's say, a heroin addiction to a gym addiction, that's going to have less negative consequences on my life. But if we really want to be free from addiction, we need to address that underlying compulsion to escape and where that comes from.
Absolutely. And yeah, no, I love the way you describe that. I think for anyone listening, that makes it very clear and easy to understand the way you've described that part of it. How big, and you're talking about, if people are working like an 80-hour work week and they're achieving, that's applauded, and that's actually seen. And I'm seeing that. I'm in New York at the moment, and I've met a lot of people where, it's probably the mecca for making money and status and a lot of, height of capitalism and all of those values that have stemmed from the US, I guess. You see it firsthand, and these people I've met so many of them, and you can tell that there's like sort of, they're almost nothing behind the eyes, and they're just projecting and talking about status and this and needing, what's next, blah, 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 blah. But these are people that are, seen as highly successful. So even what I've sort of observed in that behavior is, even if they might deep down know some of their behavior is a bit negative, they think, well, I'm successful, doesn't matter. I'm like, why would I change anything? Because I'm doing all the right things, and they feel like they're bulletproof, and it can actually almost become a negative if it's going to prevent you even, further from actually doing the work to change. But I think that's a societal thing. It's just such a big issue.
Yeah, so that they're the ones who they won't want any help until they eventually have a breakdown. And that's like classic, you call it midlife crisis, whatever it is. But it's kind of this point where people who they achieve all the material success and what society told them would make them happy, and they do it all, and then they sit there one day and go, I'm not happy. And it's like we've been sold this false promise. It's like we were told, well, if you get the money and the cars and the big house and the women and all of that kind of stuff, then you've made it, and the ego does get these little hits when you get those things. It goes, yeah, I'm making it, I'm doing it. But invariably it's not satisfying. It's like the analogy of the hungry ghosts, where it just keeps feeding itself, and they've got these big bellies, but nothing actually satisfies that hunger. And so those people, they hit a certain age. And one thing I'm seeing actually the last few years are people are hitting that age a bit earlier, whereas maybe before we mid 40s, maybe even 50s. Now people in their 30s and even late 20s are kind of asking these deeper questions, where it's like, what the hell am I doing all this for? This was all meant to make me happy, but I'm miserable as shit. And right, it's like it's at some point they get really honest with themselves and realize they were, it's like the classic one when they say you're climbing the ladder of success and you get to the top and you're like, I'm on the wrong fucking building. What did I spend all this time climbing for? And so people are asking a lot of those questions. But when people are in it, very hard to tell people like, I don't know if you're on the right path here. You're looking after your mental health, like, what's happening emotionally. Look at my bank account. I'm doing great. Okay. In that case, we kind of just wait.
Well, because you can't do anything, can you? And I mean, that's a good point. Again, for anyone listening, it's like you can sort of offer your support or your own opinion, but you can't really, if someone's not ready to change or listen, you can't force an opinion on them. If anything, that'll probably push them further the other way.
It's like an apple on the apple tree, and that apple at some point it will ripen, and then at some point it will fall from the tree when it's ready. And that's the timing piece. And a lot of people, when it comes to, addictions, mental health and everything, they want to go and just rip that apple off the tree and make someone see things a different way, or make somebody change. And we can't do that. Someone can only decide they want to change themselves. Now, to get people to that position sooner, I believe as a society, we're moving in the right direction, because as a whole, people are understanding, that we have mental health. If you've got a body, you've got physical health, you've got a mind, you've got mental health. People are understanding that, and people are starting to pay a little bit more attention to what's happening internally, just not what they've got externally. So in that case, people, that's why I think people that I'm seeing with the, work and materialism are now having those breakdowns a little bit earlier, because they're becoming aware that life isn't about what I've got. It's about what's happening in here. It's about my state of being. Am I constantly in fear that I don't have enough? Am I constantly trying to get more, or am I pouring love and joy out of my heart? Like, what's going on? And you can be broke, destitute, sitting in a gutter, but you can have love and joy pouring out of your heart. I want to be that guy than the millionaire with all the cars and everything who's in fear and greed.
Absolutely, it's clear, and you see that the person that's got nothing but has that love and joy coming out of them, they're genuinely happy, because you can't, it comes from within, and it's crazy. But what's your view on things like, social media, mass media consumption, a lot of these things that are happening through technology that are breeding a lot of negativity? I mean, do you feel like that side of it is causing a whole nother problem in itself and disconnecting people and, creating a different value system altogether as well?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Our diet isn't just what we eat and drink. Our diet's the information, the stimulus that we take in through our senses. And, you know, a lot of social media and mainstream media is like eating, God, Macca's and KFC multiple times a day for your mind and your emotions, you know. So when we think about, you know, news and media, they're like literally using our fear mechanism to grab our attention. Because that's what it does. Like when we have that fear mechanism in play, we pay attention because our survival physiology, it rules everything in our life. You know, we have this survival mechanism. Like, you know, if I try and hold my breath until I die, I can't do it. It's like if I put my head underwater and try and drown myself, I can't do it. The survival mechanism will pull me back up every single time. So what happens, this same survival mechanism is in play when we watch news, because if I get fear, I pay attention. And that's what, you know, news wants eyeballs on the TV for advertising dollars, you know. Social media is another beast altogether. I mean, the whole idea of notifications is to play on the dopamine circuits in our brain of motivation and reward. That's why we're constantly, I've got 3 notifications, let me check them off. I've got 2 over here, let me check them off. And that's really giving us a problem with our dopamine circuitry. Like dopamine's a neurotransmitter for motivation. It's what makes us move. It makes us try and partake in more dopamine. And the phone is just a dopamine hit every single time. And what happens, it's like with a drug. You know, there's a sense of satisfaction and a sense of reward early on, but that diminishes over time, every single time. And it becomes inherently more satisfying. You know, in the end, I was taking so much goddamn methamphetamine, but I was like, I needed to have it just to survive. It wasn't pleasurable, but it was just like, I just got to keep doing it. I got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like that chasing the dragon analogy. And we're doing that with the phone. That's why when we check the phone, it's like, it's inherently unsatisfying. You know, I remember I have these breaks from the phone because I try and reset, you know, that circuitry. And so I might take a week, no social media, no email, you know, none of that stuff. And it's so funny because after the week, I'll kind of be like, I'm getting back on. All right, what did I miss? And I spend about half an hour and I'm like, I missed fucking nothing.
Yeah.
Literally, I missed nothing. Whereas I would have checked multiple times a day during that week, and I would have felt like I had to do that because there was something out there that I was meant to get. So yeah, it's once again that if I'm sitting here and I feel the need to go and reach for my phone, that's that compulsion to escape again. Yeah, that's a more subtle level than a hard drug or alcohol, but that's the same mechanism in play. I need to reach for it. So yeah, I think news and phones, my God, massive impact.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying because it's like something, it's so socially acceptable that, you know, it's like who's going to, you know, people are going to justify it to themselves and say that, well, okay, it might be a problem, but everyone's doing it, so I'm not changing it. It's there, it's part of life. So it's so much up to the individual to, you know, empower themselves to make that change, or it's just not going to happen. So
it's like being at a party and like, so let's say that you've decided that, you know, I'm drinking, it might be a little bit too much. Like I need to take, you know, a bit of time off just to test my relationship with that substance. But then you go somewhere and you weren't expecting it, but everybody else in the group is having a drink. Yeah. And so all of a sudden it's like, wow, everyone else is doing it. I don't want to feel left out. And then bang, you're in. And then you have some, then you go home and drink more, you know. But it's like this social, you know, pressure that we feel with these certain behaviors. And we have to take real personal responsibility for that.
Absolutely. And what would be some simple techniques people can do with, you know, what you're talking about? I guess, you know, it's probably too hard to go in depth on how can we really, you know, go to the core and work these things out. But if people are interested to start exploring that and you think, okay, I really want to look at why am I behaving in this way? What's causing me to do this? You know, what's a first step someone can take to start digging deeper into that?
The first step with any change is awareness. You can't change what you're not aware of. So it's always important for people to become aware. Let's say that I smoke cigarettes, you know, multiple a day. And then it's just like we do it very unconsciously. You know, it becomes this habit where we do it and it doesn't require any real conscious thought. And then we started to say, well, whenever I go out for a cigarette, I'm just going to be very aware that I'm having a cigarette. And I can ask myself, I wonder why I'm having this cigarette, even while you're having it. And we can do that with any behavior. And then we can start to, if we want, we can start to test our relationship with whatever the substance or behavior is. And we can start to take a little bit of time off. And then if we find that we can't do that, we just become aware and conscious of that. So if I said I wasn't going to drink for a week, but it's Wednesday and I'm having a drink. Okay, that's interesting. I wonder why that was, you know?
Yeah.
And if we can't, then it's like, okay, well, I've got some underlying drivers happening here that are pushing me to escape. If you think about, I like to think about it as like it's tiered. So there's 3 tiers. The top tier is the behavior that we want to change. You can call it addiction, whatever you want, but the behavior is kind of on top. It's kind of a symptom of what's happening on these deeper levels. Now, society, looks at that addiction and goes, well, let's treat that very surface level, Then underneath that, we have this compulsion to escape, okay, which I'm talking about, which is like a dial. If it's very low, then we have no trouble staying away from certain behaviors because I don't have that pull to get away. But if that dial gets down this end, very hard to override that. And I'll start to undertake in those behaviors. Underneath that is this underlying emotional pain, emotional distress, this unease, this, I would call it trauma. People have different definitions for that word. The way I define it, we've all got trauma. Once again, spectrum. We've all got it, this emotional distress. And so the more of that we have going on, the higher the compulsion to escape is, the more we undertake in these behaviors. So if people are having real trouble even testing a relationship with a behavior, then it's very important to start to reach out to a professional who can start to unpack that stuff, because then it gets very individual around that trauma. And that trauma can be, the classic ideas of trauma is sexual abuse, physical abuse, veterans who've been away at war, a car crash, a classic kind of PTSD symptom, which it is. But it's also, developmental trauma, which could be, certain circumstances we went through in our younger years where maybe we weren't allowed to be angry, and that emotion got shut down. So I've got all this stewed up anger in my system. Maybe I wasn't allowed to cry. Maybe I was left to cry a lot. Maybe my parents split up. Like, there's so many different things going on. Maybe I was bullied at school and I haven't actually been able to process that. All of that kind of stuff, it gets very, very individual at that point. But the first step is becoming aware and then trying to test our relationship with whatever it is. I still try and do it with coffee because I love coffee. I was having one just before we jumped on, but I'll try and, test my relationship, have a month off every here and there. And it's an interesting exercise because I still notice that pull, even I said I'm going to have a month, but after a week, I'm like, oh, but it's been a week. It's all right. Your adenosine receptors have reset. Go and get one. I know it's like a very physical pull, and it's very much in the body. We need to maintain a real bodily awareness because like I said, we're obsessed with the thoughts, but the thoughts actually sprout from the sensations in the body. The thoughts try and justify what the body is trying to pull us towards. We can start to also look at our beliefs that we have. Our beliefs really dictate our reality. We filter our reality through our beliefs. We've all got our own individual set. That's why we're all a bit different. That's why when 2 people are arguing, it's not so much 2 people arguing, it's 2 beliefs just bumping up against each other. So a lot of people who struggle with these addictive behaviors and mental illness have a lot of beliefs going on. They strongly believe that I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of love. I don't love myself. Life is hard. I need approval. I need validation. I don't trust men. I don't trust women. I don't trust myself. It's not safe to relax. All of these things. So these deeply held beliefs. And we can even start to play with those. And I get clients sometimes to just say some of those beliefs internally and just see how they land for them. So if I get clients to sit here and say, just in your own mind, just say, I'm worthy of love. And you get a real feeling as to whether that's true for you or not. And so many clients who struggle with this stuff, I'll say, I'm worthy of love. And their whole body's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. All of these beliefs inherently, imagine if they're the branches of a tree, the trunk of that tree is, there's something wrong with me as a human being. There's something inherently wrong. I'm fucked up. I hear that all the time, right? So there's something inherently wrong with me as a human. So part of the healing process, not just with addiction, but I'm talking mental health issues, behavioral stuff, is having someone come to the realization that there's absolutely nothing wrong with them as a human being. Even if currently they're using drugs or doing something socially unacceptable, in inverted commas, there's nothing wrong with them as a human. As soon as someone realizes that, everything starts to relax.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's this huge relief, and then you can have the freedom to explore it and start working on all of the things that you've worded so clearly and so well in your description of it. So but it is such a complicated thing, and I feel like until there's not going to be mainstream societal change in this, until we can from early age have this stuff embedded in schooling. because, you know, the only way we're going to learn it long term is through our parents, but, you know, that's got to change through schooling so the next generation can pass it on and break that cycle. But you know, that's what I really believe.
It's a
Which I
slow
guess,
process.
Yeah.
I spoke about, I was talking about their individual beliefs, right? And individual beliefs can actually change really fast. Some take more time, but they can change quick, even if we've had them for decades. But then we have these group beliefs, which is what the collective or our culture believes. And, if we're kind of born into a soup of these beliefs that we just start to pick up. So someone who, hasn't directly experienced addiction or been with a close loved one who has, they've got to pick up on a group belief about it. And so that belief, it's changing, but it's really slow. So like the group belief, many years ago, some sections still have this belief is that addiction's a choice. It's a moral failing. You made a stupid choice and now you've got these consequences, right? Which is where all the stigma and all the guilt and shame comes from. Like, my God, so much of the work I do is helping people deal with this guilt and shame, because anyone with these addictive behaviors, a lot of people with mental illness, they have so much guilt and shame going on in their system, which actually reinforces the behaviors that they're doing as well. So it's like a choice. And then all of a sudden we're kind of at this phase now where a lot of society sees it as a disease. I don't agree with that, but it's a way better option than the choice one. Like the judicial system still sees it as a choice. And I went through the judicial system where you're really made to feel like a piece of shit. Oh, you were using and dealing drugs. Like, I had judges, magistrates point at me saying you're an idiot, you're a bad human, all that kind of stuff. Which reinforces as a culture, these addictive behavior. They're creating more of the problem that they're trying to solve, basically.
Exactly.
Then we have the disease model, which is much better, which is the way the medical industry views it now, which is great because it actually opens people up to treatment. It also opens up that industry to more funding when it's looked at as a disease or a medical issue. But I think, we're starting to move towards understanding that a lot of these issues are coping mechanisms for deep-seated emotional pain. And that when we start to understand that, then all of a sudden we get around people who are struggling, as opposed to going, there's something wrong with you. You need to be fixed. That's a classic. We do a course for families of addiction, because myself and a colleague, Matt Nettleton, we would speak to families all the time. And it's like, they need to go away and get fixed and come back. It's like, we're not a car. We kind of send it to them again. Like, you're involved in this as well. We need to get around them. And a lot of the thing, we're coming back to these kind of ancient traditions that we had as hunter-gatherer cultures that we've lost in this modern world. There's a tribe, I think it was in Africa. I use this analogy a bit, this story, sorry, because I love it. And it's like this tribe, and whenever a baby is going to be born into the tribe, the soothsayer or the shaman of that tribe connects with spirit and creates what they call a soul song, and each baby has their own soul songs. Everyone in the tribe has their own, and so she teaches the rest of the tribe that song, and when the baby's born, everyone's singing their soul song. And then what happens as grow up into adolescence and adults and everything, when someone in the tribe transgresses, when they do something wrong, they don't put them in a cage. They don't punish them. The whole tribe gets around them and performs a ceremony and sings their soul song to them to remind them who they are, because they've just got lost with who they are. Okay. This is such a compassionate and connected way. Yeah. I get goosebumps thinking about it, because it's so different to right now. There's something wrong with you. We're going to lock you in a cage for a bit and take away your basic human rights, when people just need love and connection, which doesn't mean, people get this mixed up because they're like, oh, so we're just going to condone all these, violent behaviors. No, you're getting mixed up. We don't condone a behavior, but we remain compassionate and present for the human being and help them where we can.
Exactly, mate. No, I really love that, what you said. And I think, and a lot of it comes from, parenting as well, because these parents are the most influential people on us and in our developmental years. And they haven't been educated themselves, and they're in pain and they haven't confronted things. And then it's this passed on trauma and these, so it goes on. And that can be really difficult, because no matter what age you get to, it's your parents, you look up to them and you have that. So sort of severing that or changing that relationship to be able to then evolve yourself is a really tough process, but something that we often have to do.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the vast majority of that early programming is obviously from our parents or caregivers. And, people can run into some issues when we start to, bring up the past and work on these things. And then people want to go into this blame and go, oh, well, fucking my parents' fault. It's like, that doesn't help. That doesn't help either, because every human being on the planet is doing the absolute best that they can, right? With their current level of consciousness and awareness. Okay. Understanding that it's really critical. And so when we understand that, we can sort of go, okay, there's some things that I need to address, these patterns that are going on for me, but also for future generations. That's why it's like you get really empowered, like knowing that I'm not just, I'm still doing work on myself now. And it's like, I'm not changing for myself. I've got a boy upstairs now, Tommy, but I'm changing for him as well. So he's not going to have to carry the burdens that I've had to. Now he'll have different burdens. We should never want a life without problems, because that's not going to exist. But ideally our kids will have a different set of problems to deal with than we do. Otherwise, like you said, these patterns get passed down through the genealogical line, and these feelings of, scarcity or lack or, fear and anxiety, like they can be 5-10 generations old, and they just keep getting passed down. So it's certainly important. But like I said, we're all doing the best we can. Like parents in like the 80s and everything were told by healthcare professionals, if your baby's crying, just put them down because they're trying to manipulate you. And I'm like that's what they were told. It's crazy. So they were listening. Yeah. They were listening to advice and going, okay, that's what we're meant to do. We'll do it. We know now that's a horrible idea. Like if you want to talk about, a great way to traumatize and dysregulate someone's nervous system, do that to a baby. So that's like we start to understand things differently and move forward. And then there's things that we're doing now that we'll look back on and go, I can't believe we did that, but I think we're moving in the right direction, Nick, slowly.
And that's all we can do. We can all only do our best, and not hold resentment. Like you said, it took me a while to realize that. I was always thinking, I had resentment about certain things with my parents. And I realized, hang on, they've been so amazing in so many ways. And the same way that they might struggle with things that I've started to grasp more, there's a million things that they would look at in me and have the same frustration. And you know what? At the core, as long as everyone's got the right intention and you're doing it out of love, then you can't really do much more, can you? You just got to.
You can't.
You can't. Really, that's all you can do.
It's so important. Intention. What is my intent? That's sort of the part that we control. And and we're flawed human beings. We're not perfect. We're meant to stuff up and make mistakes. Yeah. But if our intention's pure, then we can never look back on something with regret or resentment. Yeah. Resentment's a big one. Resentment and blame just keep us stuck. As soon as we point at something else and go, that's the cause of my problems, I can't move forward because I'm bound to this external. And this is like we're talking about, with the materialism and getting all the cars and the money. It's like I'm looking externally to try and solve a very internal problem. Where if we make it, our own internal state that we're working on, then all of a sudden we're not dependent on what's happening out here. Michael Singer puts it great. He goes, we actually free the world. We free other people in the world because we're not blaming, we're not clinging, we're not striving for anything out here. It's all in here. So we let them go and we work in here.
Yeah, I love that, mate. That's a really good one. So we finish with sort of 5 quick questions. Before I go into that, do you have any things that you do daily, any daily sort of habits that help you that you stick to, or anything in your own personal life that you can share?
I movement, is a big one. I love whether it's the gym, walking, that kind of thing, playing with my boy at the park. Movement is important for me, with my mental and emotional health. I'm going a little bit away from sort of daily routines and everything. I went down the rabbit hole. I would, meditate religiously every day. I would go through breath work. I would, visualizations, like all of this kind of stuff. And I think if it's a daily practice, it's just being incredibly, sometimes brutally honest with myself at all times. Yeah, with that intention, So I'm very, very aware of why I'm doing things and where it's coming from. And even if that's really uncomfortable for me at times, I think that radical honesty is so important because we bullshit ourselves so easily. And we will justify our action. It's so easy, you know. I remember, I'll just share this quick story. I remember a few years ago, it's the day I decided I need to stop listening to my mind and the thoughts that were going on. Because I remember I decided that, you know, I wasn't having any drinks, and I wasn't drinking much at all. I might have a beer or two here or there, but I'm like, I'm not going to, you know, drink for a month. And it was a big week at the centre, like busy clients in and out, like it was hectic. And then it was worked all day Saturday, and then Saturday night I was driving home, and I think the Kangas were playing footy that night. And so I was excited to sit on the couch and watch that. And I'm on the way home, and the mind pops up and goes, "Oh, you stop at the bottle shop, get some nice craft beers, you know, you deserve it." And I'm like, no, I just said I'm not going to have a drink. There's a debate with my mind. So I get home, sit on the couch, game's about 15 minutes away, and the mind just won't stop. It is just intense. And it's giving me like a bloody PhD dissertation on my whole life and why I deserve to go and have a couple of beers. Remember you helped that old lady across the road, you know, 5 years ago, blah, blah, blah. You never have any fun anymore. Like, it's just badgering me, right? And so I kind of submitted to it. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, all right, I'll go down and get a 6-pack of beer. I went and got this beer, got home, opened it, footy game was starting. I took one sip of beer, and that exact same voice that told me to go and get the beer goes, "I can't believe you're having a beer, you piece of shit." And I'm like, that's it. I'm not listening to this thing anymore, because it is totally badgering me. So for me, it's being really honest. It's not listening to what's going on up here a lot of the time, and sort of trust what's going on in my heart.
I really love that. And thank you for sharing that story. And I think it's something that I've, you know, because I've always been really, you know, strict on these daily habits that I do, and it keeps me feeling grounded. But I, you know, started being more lenient on a lot of things for that same reason, because that becomes the new chore, and they're actually meant to be there to keep you healthy and look after you. And then it becomes, oh, I've got anxiety because I need to do this. And then it bleeds into that same psychology, bleeds into everything you're doing. And so I think it's about that very fine line of, yes, I'm going to do things that make me feel good and that are healthy for me and that are, you know, going to help me have a better life. But I'm also going to not make that into a chore or something I have to do, or I'm not going to punish myself if I don't do it, because then it sort of defeats half the purpose of it. But it
does. We become bound to it. Yeah, I had a client who was doing the cold therapy, each day, and they were getting into Wim Hof, which I went down that rabbit hole as well, which I like, by the way. It's like a tool in the tool belt. So I mightn't do it for months, then I just whip it out for a couple of days in a row, But he was like this cold therapy thing, and one day he's like, I haven't done my cold therapy today, and I'm just, I'm anxious, and so pissed me off. I just need to get home and do it. I'm like, you need to get home and do it. So this is you could feel the energy. It's really tight, like really rigid energy. And I think in life, because mine is kind of maybe like unique. My natural inclination is to be like that. Is to have this structure. This is why my partner, Melissa's been such an amazing, teacher for me, is because she ain't like that at all. She's the opposite. So she's taught me to loosen up, whereas I've kind of taught her to be a little bit more structured when she needs to. So this is how we grow in relationship, which is another topic. But it's like that, okay, I don't need to actually do anything, know. And from that place, I might want to do the cold plunge, but I'm not bound to it. I don't need to do it, because that's another escape.
Oh, totally. It's another escape. And I think when anything as well becomes a thing where something's seen as the be all end all, or, it almost becomes like a cult-like thing at that point. It's like there's a lot of these tools are great, but if the tool is in your mind, or it's been presented to you as this is the be all end all, this is the method that's going to, solve all your problems. If you just do this is what will hurt. It's like, well, no, that's bullshit, because, there's a million different things, and it's about finding what works for you. And it's a never ending process. It's not like one thing's going to solve all your problems. So it's sort of, anyway, that's a whole nother.
That's our human nature of wanting that quick fix, though, isn't it? It's like, it is. Please, is there just a pill I can take to make this go away? No.
It's not simple. There's no solution. The solution is just to enjoy the moment right now, and do your best at things, and realize that there literally is no endpoint. The endpoint is to keep learning and keep growing until the day you die, and realize that there's no sort of finish line. It's just to keep growing and learning.
Yeah, people expect that they're gonna become enlightened and I don't know, like would dissolve into light at some point. I'm not sure what they expect.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's like, I'm like, no. I heard there's a good quote I heard recently that someone says, please don't ever become perfect because you'll have no one else to relate to. And it's so true. We have this idea that we're going to be perfect at some point. If you're human, you're never going to be perfect. And that's fine. It's beautiful, actually.
Yeah. So it's part of life.
Yeah.
So I've got these final questions. These can be just, one-line answers, whatever comes to mind.
Hit me with it.
The first one is, what is your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Oh, good question. The one that just popped up for me then, actually, I haven't thought about this in a while, was I must have been 5 or 6 maybe. So my brother's 14 years older than me. So big age gap there. And, I always looked up to him. He was kind of my hero. And he was great because looking back, I didn't appreciate it as much then, but, looking back now, I was bugging him all the time. Let's kick the footy. Let's play cricket. Let's do this. And you imagine a 4-year-old asking an 18-year-old, that can't be much fun for the 18-year-old. But this day I was bugging him to kick the footy. And I remember it was pissing down outside, like belting down rain. And I remember he looked outside and just went, yep, all right, let's do it. And I remember we put our tracky pants and everything on, and we went out there for like hours, rolling around in the mud, tackling each other, trying to kick the footy in the pouring rain. And I came back in. I think Mum took a picture. I should ask her if she still has it, of us just covered in head to toe from mud, holding the footy. But I just remember how happy and free I felt.
I love that, mate.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit teary thinking about it, actually. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice. No, thank you for sharing it. No, I love that question, and in a lot of the talks I do, whenever you ask someone to relive something, I could see it on you when you're telling that it's a nice like gratitude sort of.
Yeah. When we have any emotional imprint, then it will stick with that, and that's why on an emotional level, if someone's thinking back to maybe not a joy or grateful, but maybe more of a troubling memory, then all of a sudden the body feels like that's happening again. It's like we're having a dream. You had a dream that you're getting chased, and then you wake up and you're like sweating, but you're just in bed, but your body literally sweated because it thought it was happening.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is what do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in society at the moment? I mean, there's many, or one of them.
Yeah, a lack of understanding on trauma. I know that's kind of my wheelhouse and what I teach on, but I think that the fact that we don't understand trauma and how it affects not just mental and emotional health, but physical health as well. I think the understanding of that will really change the way that I think over the next 10 years, you'll see it a lot more. It's going to be, being trauma informed will be a real thing. And I'm hoping to be actually a big part of that in Australia. But I think that's the biggest one. For some people who want to understand about how impactful trauma is, research the ACE study, so Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Dr. Vince Folletti ran that. A study that everyone should know about, but an incredible display of just the effects that trauma has on all areas of our health. I think if we understand that as a society, it's going to have a drastic impact on the mental health of nations.
Yeah, massively. And that's what I was sort of going to ask is the next thing, do you see things improving over the next 10 years and moving in the right direction, which
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, but I'm not certain. Because it's become a big focus now, and especially here in Australia, a lot more money's being put into it, a lot more focus on mental health. That doesn't necessarily mean things get better. Just because we throw money and attention at things, it depends what we start to throw money and attention at. And unfortunately, a lot of the negative side of it is just putting this money into more of the same that has got limited results over the last however many decades, just putting more money into that. I see a lot of people, politicians and everything, maybe say, oh, well, we need more lived experience, blah, blah, blah. And they'll go and do these big, meetings and town hall meetings and hear from lived experience people, but then not do anything with it and just put more money into the same stuff. Like it's just a bit of a PR stunt. So I think we're going to need to look at many different avenues because like you said before, like we're all different. People need a menu of options because right now people want to do a mental health care plan and get medication. That's it. That has its place on the menu it's just one small place, what it should be. And there should be this whole other menu of options for people. And I hope that's the direction that we're heading.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we need more people like you doing, digging deep and offering these practical services, because, me being in the space, I've seen the exact same thing that you're talking about, that a lot of money gets thrown around, and it's great that there's awareness, and it is great that, there's more services and money, but a lot of it is about platitudes and trying to tick boxes and, do what's perceived as the right thing, or put a Band-Aid on it, rather than, hey, let's actually look at, how we can change the infrastructure and really create some proper preventative services that are going to help long term and have that impact. So, we need more people like you doing it, mate.
I
Which
couldn't agree more, Nick.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things I've been, researching on lately is a lot of the way that we in our modern era have tackled mental health is all around how quickly can I get someone back to work to feed this capitalistic machine. And so we need a real reframe. Getting back to work's important, but it's not the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Anyway, we could probably do a whole podcast just on that topic. So I've got two more here. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
Inner peace.
Yep.
I think just that one thing, I'll just share this real quick story. One of the exact moment for me when I knew I never needed to use drugs again was this moment in that session that I did with Melissa in her office, when I really shed back these layers of when I decided that I hated myself. This was at 4 years old. I decided that I hated myself. But what 4-year-old deserves to think that about themselves? But that's not just me. That's a whole lot of people feel that way. And all of a sudden I had this moment where everything just went completely quiet in my body and mind. And Melissa asked me, she goes, what's happening now? I have my eyes closed. And I said to her, I'm completely and utterly with myself, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be. That's happiness to me. Powerful. There's absolutely no desire to escape this present experience, because for decades before that, every moment was about trying to get away from myself. So I think that's happiness. I don't even like the word happiness. I like the word peace or being content, because happiness tends to be a bit of a fluff word. It's interesting. You ask people, like, stop people on the street, hey, what do you want out of life? I want to be happy. I want to be happy. What does happiness mean to you? I don't know.
or it might mean something, that, like what we were talking about, it might mean happiness means achieving blah, blah, blah.
I want to win the lottery.
Doing all these things that aren't going to do. And that's why I asked that question to everyone. What's your definition of happiness? To try and, show our listeners, well, happiness, the meaning we've put around that. Happiness isn't, this hit of dopamine or this exciting drug-like thing. Happiness, exactly how you described it in that story you just gave, happiness is feeling that contentment, not that, I'm going to protect myself from feeling emotions, and I'm going to stop myself from having all these lows, and I need to be, just having amazing things happen all the time. That we're going to have ups and downs, but happiness is, I know no matter what happens, I'm enough. And that's all it is. And then, because that's a superpower, that there's not many things that can happen that you can't handle if you feel that, if you get yourself
absolutely
to that.
That's such a great point, Nick. And I love you even said, like, we can feel inner peace and content even if we're experiencing deep sadness. When we're experiencing deep grief, we can still hold space for that, because we're taught at a young age to have aversion to negative emotions and a craving for the positive ones. And this starts this whole, addiction cycle. But, when we find that inner peace, then sadness is fine, joy is fine, grief is fine. It's all fine, because we've got that solid foundation. And it's not, happiness ain't out here. It's in here. Yeah. And then all of a sudden someone goes, well, I can't feel it. Okay. Well, now that's your path. The path is unpacking. Why can't I access that inner peace and happiness right now? And then we have these layers that we've built up, these walls around our heart based on what we've been through in our life.
Absolutely, mate. And just as a final point on that, the other side of it is also not saying, because, then people will argue, well, okay, I may as well just do nothing then, because if feeling inner peace is the solution, then why don't I just sit in a room and do nothing and give up on living a life? And it's like, no, it's about having that, but still working out what your values are, what you want to achieve, what you want to do, being ambitious, but not being attached to it, So then and the ironic thing is you're going to achieve more if you can live in that anyway, because you're going to be more sustainable. You're going to make smarter decisions. You're going to do it for the right reason. It's like the byproduct of it is you probably have more success.
That's hard for people to get their head around, because I hear the same thing as well. Oh, I'm just going to sit in a room and do nothing. I'm like, no, you won't. It's this weird thing. It's like, no, you won't, because you're a human and you're going to engage with life. Even sitting in a room doing nothing, you're still engaging with life. But it's like, am I in survival or am I in creation? Now, most people are in survival. Yeah. Survive, fear. What's next? What do I need to get? If you're in it within a piece, then you engage with life from a place of creation. So it's like, I wonder what's going to happen today. I wonder what I'm going to experience today. So even, catching up with a coffee for a friend or having a walk along the beach or whatever it is, it's from a place of creation. All of a sudden, you'll find that you start like meeting new people and having new experiences. If I pass someone on the beach out here, I'm like, hey, how you doing? I start talking to them. But if I'm in survival, I'm like, they're going to judge me. They're not going to like me. So I actually limit my experience of life. When we find that inner peace, then we actually engage with life more fully. We don't just sit in a room and do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you've described that as well. And, it's such a good way of putting it. So final one, there's many, you've told me many of these in your story and what you've described today when we've chatted, but what would you say is the most courageous thing you've done?
Most courageous thing I've done. I think going ahead and starting our business. Yeah, at the time, I'm someone who I would let other people's opinions sway me. I would justify it as my own, but other people would say, hey, you shouldn't do that, even though I wanted to. And then later on, my thoughts would go, yeah, you shouldn't do that. And I wouldn't, which would, like we spoke about, limit life. But when we started the business, I hadn't been clean that long. It was a big risk. I was at the time like, I'm changing the way people see addiction and mental health. I'm going for it. And I had a lot of people who really cared about me. And it was from a place of love and caring, who said, should you maybe not do that or not do that yet? You should be focusing on your recovery. And despite all that, I said, I respect that, but I'm doing it anyway. And so, I think that was the biggest, and putting myself out there, starting to do videos, opening up about my story. We would go in when we first started to doctors' clinics who would basically walk out on us, shut the door in our face and that kind of thing. But we kept going, and I think that was probably the most courageous thing I've done, because a lot of people were saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. And I had a history of believing other people, but I believed myself this time. And that's meant that I've trusted myself from that day forward.
Oh, well, yeah, mate, I think it's incredibly courageous. And, it's helped me even listening to your story and you tell me that. And I think it's an amazing thing what you've done and are achieving. And I think a big lesson for people from this as well is, it's okay to follow your gut and listen to what your intuition's telling you, because we've got noise all around us. But I think if we really want to listen to it, we all know deep down what the right decision is for us. So if you can let go of everything else and just listen to that, it might be scary, but you're going to make decisions that are in line with what you truly want. And that's going to lead to, positive outcomes.
Yeah, good advice, Nick. So true. And like you said, it will bring up fear, but I think the word used was courage, or it was the most courageous thing you've done. And courage isn't doing something brave and not feeling fear. It's when we feel fear, but we do it anyway, because we know deep down, it's like, I know this is what I'm meant to do.
Totally. Yeah, you can't avoid fear, but you do it anyway because it means something to you, which is so important to understand. Yeah. So finally, where can people go if they want to find out more about you and the work you're doing? I'll put this in the show notes as well, but where can we send them?
Just the Centre for Healing. So just check us out, Facebook, Instagram. I think we're on TikTok now. I don't know, our social media person. It's all the kids, or I'm not on it. But I think we're on TikTok. But yeah, mainly Instagram, Facebook, and you can get to our website through there. But the website's courses.centreforhealing.com.au. But I think that's right. But if you go through the social medias, you'll find it. And we have courses on trauma, on addiction, families of addiction, philosophies on mental health, and we have 2 practitioner trainings: root cause therapy and embodied processing, which is a somatic-based therapy to help unpack a lot of this stuff. So yeah, check that out. And then shoot us a message on the social medias if you have any questions, or maybe you wanted to ask something after hearing me chat today, but yeah, you can reach out there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, as I said, we'll have that in the show notes. And again, mate, it's been so good reconnecting with you. Thank you so much for making the time. I genuinely, love chatting to you and love hearing about all the work you're doing, because I think it really is incredible. Your story is amazing, and the work you're doing, and you're impacting people's lives. So I think it's such a great example for everyone listening of what you can do and what you can overcome. So I just want to say again, thanks for making the time to sit here and talk about that with me.
Awesome, Nick. No, I received that fully, and right back at you, mate. Appreciate you and the work you do, and look forward to talking more in the future, and I'm looking forward to reading your book.
I appreciate it, mate. Thanks to Ryan Hassan for joining me today for Move Your Mind. And just a reminder that the Move Your Mind book is now available globally. You can get it on Amazon or Booktopia in Australia. It's in stores Australia-wide, and it means the world to us if you can support us and go and get a copy of the book. The audiobook comes out in January. It's not far off. And if you go to my website, addiction..com, you can sign up and get a free chapter of the book, or alternatively, or additionally, you can do both. You can go to nickbracks.com/moveyourmind. We've got a free PDF it's a toolkit for habit formation and a whole range of tools that go hand in hand with the book. So you can get that for free. So please keep supporting us. It really means the world if you can share this episode, leave comments. Again, that really helps us to get this podcast out there. And again, to all of you guys that keep following the Move Your Mind podcast and allowing us to do this every week, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.